Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Joining me tonight from the Album Divers podcast is Trevor Dale. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me on My Weekly Mixtape.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is awesome. I've been listening to your podcast. I was following you in your prior one. I think we've collaborated a little bit in the past as well, but I really love what you're doing with this new one. This is great. Happy to be on.
Well, I'm glad to have you, and I get to start by asking you my first-timers question, and that is, Trevor, what does the word mixtape mean to you?
Well, that's a great question. As a guy that's devoted an entire podcast to the album format with Album Divers, obviously, I think song order matters a lot. Since I'm not somebody that can actually create music, I think the closest thing I can do is creating a mixtape for friends. It's something that I grew up doing. Probably normally it was that girl in my awkward junior high and high school years that I couldn't figure out any other way to communicate with. So creating some sort of mixtape, I'd put these songs together and go, I think she knew what I was trying to say with that one. Did it work? Not very often, but it was still fun to put that together. So I think a mixtape for me, in short, it's just using somebody else's art to create another piece of art. It's an extension of yourself that you might not be able to say in a different way. So like I said, I'm happy this podcast exists, and it's definitely something I did a lot growing up and still do with the playlist formats in terms of digital that we have today.
And that's what we're going to do tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about a topic that is divisive, it's fun, and it's certainly one that people see in a different way. And that is 90s one-hit wonders. And let me start by saying we should probably define our criteria for a one-hit wonder tonight because everybody sees it differently. So for tonight, our terminology that you and I went back and forth with, for those that are listening, is the fact that the artist or band can only have one song, if that cracks the Billboard Top 40. Now, with that said, a Top 40 hit isn't a requirement, because if we're going back to the 80s, a lot of people remember Modern English as a one-hit wonder with I'll Melt With You. That song, as much as everybody has it in their musical lexicon, only reached number 78 on the Billboard US Hot 100. But regardless, they are still a one-hit wonder, even without a top 40 hit. They're actually a no-hit wonder, which is using our criteria at least. And the reason we say only one song is because sometimes there is the lesser-known second hit. Two examples of that would be Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Everybody knows Good Vibrations as their huge hit song. However, they had a follow-up single, Wild Side, which sampled Lou Reed and Wild Side. That reached number 10 on the Billboard US Hot 100, although it didn't have as much longevity. Along the same lines, Snow's Informer was a number one hit, but he had a follow-up, Girl I've Been Hurt, and that reached number 19. So it was a top 20 hit. But for some reason, Snow keeps making one-hit wonder lists. So I find that whole part interesting. And then on the flip side of that spectrum, Patreon mixtaper Chad Lamassa chimed in saying that he brought up a 90s one-hit wonders list, and it included the song Loser by Beck. And his commentary was, what? How is Beck a one-hit wonder? Now, I personally don't see him as one. However, using our terminology tonight, Loser is Beck's only song to crack the Billboard Top 40 because Where It's At, which was another massive hit, only hit 61. So technically, Beck is a one-hit wonder, but with 5 other songs cracking the top 100, is he really, though?
Exactly. Like we were talking about Sinead O'Connor by this criteria is a one-hit wonder, and kind of no way, right? I was looking up the other one that gets tossed around a lot is if people name off their 90s one-hit wonders, Spin Doctors is always thrown out. They are technically not. Little Miss Can't Be Wrong is also something that charted. So we're a little loose with this, I guess, is kind of what you're saying.
By all means. And at the end of the day, the term one-hit wonder is not meant to be offensive. To me, I consider it endearing because as a songwriter myself, I would give anything to have one hit. I mean, Baby Got Back has made Sir Mix-a-Lot over $100 million. I don't care if there's a stigma behind. I think it's an endearing term because how hard is it to have a hit song? It's not easy. Think about all the bands out there. And even if it is only one, that is a monumental thing.
Absolutely. And as we were compiling this, as I was getting into the 10 that I picked, some of these songs are some of my favorites. Some of these artists are still some of my favorites as well. So yes, it does not demonize them to just this one particular part of the music shelf in history. I think there's some amazing music that we'll get into today.
Agreed. And so with those semantics out of the way, Trevor, what were you looking for in your bank of songs that you're choosing from this evening?
Yeah, so when you gave that criteria, I thought, okay, this is going to be kind of hard because I'm really going to have to find the ones that meet. And what we discovered, or what I discovered, is there's a lot that could meet that criteria. So it actually it opened the door to a lot of choices. So I felt like instead of just saying, okay, here's the 10 that I found, I could sort of decide exactly how I wanted this list to sound. And so I did personalize a little bit. The caveat for me is, I guess what I would call this is like the Trevor retrospective on 90s, because these are all songs that I still want to listen to. You're not going to hear the earworms that I wish never made their way into the radio streams back in the day and get stuck in your head. These are songs that if I listen to now, and I have been, as I've compiled this list for the show here, they're great songs. So that was my only criteria, is that it met the terms that you laid out, but that I still love it. That's what these are about for me.
Same here. Basically, meeting the criteria, when we were discussing it, I said, wow, I hope I'm not setting myself up for hours of digging. And believe it or not, within a couple of searches, I found a list where I was almost overwhelmed with the amount of songs. So for me, this list is not only a one-hit wonders list, it also kind of doubles as an underrated artists list.
Well said. Yep.
People define them as the one-hit wonder, and then they think, oh, there's nowhere else to go from here. And I think all the artists that I have in my bank tonight have a deep catalog of music that even if you were to just go to their artist page on Spotify or Apple Music, you're going to discover a lot more than that one hit.
Well said. You're going to have to stop me from gushing about a couple of these as we go here.
Well, let's get down to business. Tonight, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Trevor and I will be curating the ultimate 90s one-hit wonders mixtape, and we'll use that old cassette deck approach. Trevor, as my special guest, will begin side A with his first song choice, and then I'll add a song that I feel best follows up that choice. We'll then flip-flop choosing songs until we've mapped out 10 songs for side A. We'll then give our mixtape a proverbial flip, and we'll map out side B, only this time I'll kick things off with Trevor choosing second. Our overall goal for the episode is to craft the best 90s one-hit wonders mixtape possible through only 20 songs. At the end of the show, you can take our conversation to the next level by visiting the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com to give our final mixtape a listen via the embedded playlist. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. There you can enjoy ad-free episodes of the show, become a future guest, and so much more. And a few of the Patreon mixtapers chimed in with the songs they would use to kick off our 90s one-hit wonders mixtape, and I want to give a few quick shout-outs there. Chad Lamassa chimed in with the Proclaimers' I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles, saying that he had sort of forgotten about the track, and then when him and his wife rewatched How I Met Your Mother, and the song was featured in several episodes as it was the cassette single stuck in Marshall's cassette tape deck, kind of brought it back to the forefront. This was an interesting pick, Chad, because the song was actually released in 1988 and charted at number 11 on the UK singles chart, along with topping the charts in Australia, Iceland, and New Zealand. It wasn't until 1993 when Benny and June made it a hit in the US where it reached number 3. So you are correct. It is a one-hit wonder of the 1990s and technically the 1980s as well. And the song has some awesome punk covers by Down by Law and MXPX, but I digress. Next up, Ben from the Too Vague podcast was savage with his pick of Right Said Fred's I'm Too Sexy, saying that, true story, he used to fill the jukebox with at least 6 or more plays with the song before he and his friends left the pool hall. He said, I was kind of a jerk back then, but it made me laugh. The thought of the quote unquote serious pool players having to listen to it over and over and over. So that makes me wonder if that's how the song became a #1 hit in the first place. Tom Hutchinson chimed in with Bound to the Floor by Local H, saying he knows it didn't hit the mainstream charts, but it did clock in at number 10 on the modern rock charts, and that it was such a heavy, hard song that has that distinct mid-90s sound through and through. And by our quote-unquote rules, a song doesn't have to crack the Billboard Top 40, so totally fair game, and I love that pick. Philip Bergman chimed in with the dance remix of December 1963, Oh What a Night, because technically it was the one hit for the 4 seasons in the 1990s. However, he decided to, how shall we say, piss the Oh What a Night away and choose Chumbawamba's Tub Thumping instead. Seeker chimed in with Standing Outside of a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand by Primitive Radio Gods. Sean Goff chimed in with disbelief that Linda Perry is a one-hit wonder on the performing side of the spectrum, and he went with Four Non-Blondes, What's Up, saying this was the song that had everyone screaming at the top of their lungs in 1993. And Jen Fink chimed in with a pick for Missy, The Things That You Do by Gina Thompson, or asking if we should go with the most requested TRL song, Tom Green's The Bum Bum song, saying, hey, you didn't say the song had to be good. And I'm not going to lie, I have that on several of my 90s playlists. And it was also talked about on episode 76, the ultimate guilt-free 90s Guilty Pleasures playlist with Neatcast's Zach Derby. So if you want to hear more about Tom Green's Bum, that's a good place to start. But with that said, Tom's Bum is not alone. If you know the song, you'll get that reference because David Owens also chimed in with that track. Once again, if you want to chime in for future My Weekly Mixtape episodes, consider joining the Mixtaper family at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape.
Are you feeling the back-to-school crunch? We all know that family dinners can be a juggling act, but HelloFresh is here to help. From planning and shopping to prepping and cooking, they've got your back. Imagine having fresh ingredients and picky eater-approved recipes delivered right to your door each week. That's what HelloFresh offers. Their new build-to-plate meals let every member of the family create their perfect plate. No more making multiple dinners, just one delicious meal with endless options. With a rotating menu of 50 delicious recipes every week, HelloFresh makes it easy to find something that will please even the pickiest eater in your house. I love the versatility. I can swap proteins and vegetables to cater to everyone's tastes. It's a game changer for my family meals. And let me tell you, HelloFresh saves me so much time. I can focus on quality time instead of stressing over what to cook. One of my favorites has been the One Pot Mexicali Black Bean Soup with the works. Ready to solve your family dinner's dilemma? With HelloFresh, you get nutritious meals without the hassle. And for a limited time, kids eat free. Go to HelloFresh.com/PantheonKids to unlock this exclusive offer. That's one free kids meal per box for 2 months while your subscription is active, just by going to HelloFresh.com/PantheonKids. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Enjoy home-cooked meals with ease and bring the family together at the dinner table.
Hey folks, this is Martin Popoff.
And John Gaffney from Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Every month, we take a deep dive into an AC/DC album, giving you some history and trivia, along with a track-by-track discussion.
We also have episodes where we do rankings, lists, tackle all kinds of fun AC/DC related topics.
So tune in every month to get your fill of AC/DC and more.
At Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast.
So, Trevor, with that musical food for thought out in the atmosphere, I'm officially pressing the record button on our mixtape, and the floor is yours. Why don't you dive into the song you chose to kick off Side A?
All right. I think I took this in kind of a unique way. I've been listening to a lot of your episodes, and I know a lot of times that first song needs to just knock your socks off. Totally support that. But I guess the way I would say it is it's got to draw you in, and that can do that if the song's got a lot of energy around it. Number one song on a mix often does that. This one's a little bit different in the way it does, and I think it's fitting for ours. It fits our criteria. I chose Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen off of Baz Luhrmann's 1998 album. The song actually came out in 97, and so this is a song, if you've heard it, all about advice for people as they're graduating. It starts off, the very first words are, "Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 1999. And then it goes on to sample some music, lots of good advice in general. I just think it's a good place to start. If I'm doing a retrospective of music, if I could send this back to my 90s self, I feel like not only is this the music I should be listening to, I feel like this is the advice I should be listening to. So this is track one on our mix.
Kicking us off on a positive note, reached number 45 on the Billboard US Hot 100. The thing about this song, to me at least, was that it was hypnotic. I don't ever remember seeking out this song to say, let me put it on. But when it came on the radio, it just took over the moment I was in, driving out with my friends, and it just mesmerized you to the point where you were kind of taken back by the message. Because the 90s was very much a very aggressive decade for music. A lot of pushback. You got the punk rock attitude, the grunge attitude. This was a very positive, uplifting song that musically could have fit with any of the songs that had the opposite lyrical perspective, if you think about the mid to late 90s. And to me, that was very refreshing. Obviously, Baz went on to do amazing stuff with like the Moulin Rouge soundtrack and all other things, but this might be one of his finest moments because it does capture such a unique moment in 90s music.
Yeah, no question about it. This one did make it on its way to a lot of mixtapes. So 98, if I may, Brian, when did you graduate from high school?
I was 95. So at that point,
right.
this song would be more of my college graduation single than high school.
There you go. Well, I was a little after this, but still, this was floating around on mix. It would be mix CDs when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. So definitely this is one that I had some memories with as well. And yeah, exactly. It's in that place in the 90s where you're post-grunge, kind of trying to find footing in terms of the next place. And I just thought a little advice is probably a good place to do it. Nice place to start off, I think, a mix of some music here.
Yeah, now we've got this good feeling going through our systems, and I want to keep that good feeling going. And I do want to bring it a little bit more to that 90s rock sound that we're used to. And I'm going to go with one that I feel like coming out of Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen will kick off kind of the fun atmosphere of the mixtape, because we've already got the positive vibes going. Let's have a little bit of fun and go off of 1998's Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too. And I'm going to go with the New Radicals, You Get What You Give. Just like Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen, the track reached number 45 on the US Billboard Hot 100. It was ranked number 37 on Rolling Stone's 50 Best Songs of the 90s. Not even one-hit wonders, just overall songs of the decade. Number 11 on VH1's Greatest One-Hit Wonders of the 90s. And number 64 on VH1's Greatest One-Hit Wonders Ever. To me, this song was catapulted largely in part to the music video, because a lot of my friends at the time were talking about, you know, that song, The Guy with the Hat. That was kind of how, because at the time we didn't have the ability to Shazam a song and have it pop up on our phone. You had to either wait for the DJ to say what it was, wait for the video to end to get those credits, or hopefully one of your buddies knew the answer. And this one was a song that a lot of people were talking about. The album exploded. Everybody was rocking this song. It was all over the radio. And then that was it. And I'm always taken back by that because this song was just so infectious. I'm shocked that the label didn't push some more songs from the album to try to get this band to the next level, because songwriting wise, this is songwriting perfection as far as I'm concerned. I love this one.
I don't know how you can't not love this song. I was just about to say the music video is the part that stands out probably the most for me on this one as well. I would have been 14 at the time this song came out. So MTV was still something I was kind of like sneaking around my parents as being on the TV in our house. And yes, I remember the skinny, bald, very, very confident guy in the fisherman hat for the song. In fact, that might be what I walked into the record store, and like you said, you couldn't Shazam it in that day. So the guys that worked at these record stores, they don't get enough credit for knowing what people were talking about when they walked in. Okay, it's this one song, and I saw it, and the guy had the hat on. I think we did that a lot in the 90s, and somebody was able to pull this up for me off of that description. So yeah, what a great song. Love that you kept the positivity going. I think this is a great pick for number 2.
And I will say, having worked during the late 90s at a music store, there were more times that people would come in and just start to hum a song or drop a line. And one of the ones I remember for this song specifically, somebody came in and said, okay, I'm looking for this song, and the only thing I could tell you about it is there's some part about Beck and Hanson and Courtney Love and Marilyn Manson. And I'm like, I know exactly what song you're talking about. So love the pick, obviously, because, well, yeah, I chose it anyway. Moving, heading back now to you, Trevor, for track 3.
All right. I'm going to keep the good vibes going in a certain way. I will admit that this is one I had to dig into the lyrics to know that the good vibes were still going, because we're going to transition a little bit from the good vibes sound and lyrically to just more on the lyrical side. The sound, though, is going to throw back into some of that 90s grunge sound, and that is In the Meantime by Space Hog.
Yes.
This one is from 1995. And so it's funny, as I'm compiling these songs here, I'm putting the date of each one here. I think I can pinpoint exactly when my coming of age years started. I think it's like March of 96 or something. So this particular song, to be honest, is back to this being a Trevor retrospective. This is one that I've appreciated since those years. I don't know when I discovered Space Hog, but this was not the walking into the record store saying, what's that music video with the guy with the hat or whatever's going on with this music video. So with that being said, I dug into lyrics and things in a little bit later, so different phase of mind in analyzing these. And there's a lot of positivity in these songs. The chorus is talking about, we love the all of you. We love the all of you. I think this is kind of a nice way to segue into what's going to end up being, a little bit more on the nose with some 90s moping and angst, as it should. But let's keep those going a little bit longer with Space Hog. This is an awesome song, and I'm glad I got to put this together as an adult and to kind of decide what songs really make the cut. This does.
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you, man. If you didn't pick this one, I was. This was a song that I definitely sought out in a record store. And my criteria for looking for this song was, it starts off with one of the most ridiculous bass lines, almost a bass solo to start the song. And the guy behind the counter said, I know exactly what you're talking about. And he actually had the CD behind the counter, and he played it to confirm it for me. And I bought Resident Alien senior year in high school for me. That bass line just captures, as a bass player myself, as soon as you hear that opening, you're going, my God, is this a funky song? What are we doing here? And then it goes into kind of this big soaring song. Beautiful vocals, powerful lyrics. The song was also used in a nostalgic sense with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So there's that newer connection that's introducing this song to younger generations who might not have been around for its initial run. The song reached number 32 on the US Billboard Hot 100. So we're moving up a little bit. And yeah, one of my favorite bass lines of the 90s, hands down. Love the song. And coming out of it, you did mention that we've been in a kind of a positive vibe here, but the 90s weren't always positive, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of that angst that we talked about, but I'm going to do it in the most perfect of power pop ways. Now, this song only reached number 17 on the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart, so it never even hit Hot 100. So this most certainly falls underrated as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like Super Drag should have been a massive, massive group, especially after 1996's Regretfully Yours and the power pop perfection of Sucked Out. I've talked about this song on the show before. To me, when you get that perfect power pop song, it stays enduring for generations. I think about The Cars' Magic. I think about Fountains of Wayne, Stacy's Mom. These are songs that decades later are going to still make people smile because there's that sense of rock, there's that sense of heft and power to it. There's a drive, there's an energy, almost a punk spirit that's woven into a beautifully crafted and well-written pop song that is hooky, catchy, and you can sing along with. And Sucked Out just checks off all of those boxes as far as I'm concerned. One of my favorites.
And I love the story on this one. So this is another one that I kind of discovered later. But, you know, the lyrics, if you break them down, and it's sort of a giant middle finger to the music industry, which was sort of ironic. What I didn't realize is this was like an after fact for them. Their album was done. They then went ahead and threw this out at the record industry, and they just completely, record label rather, I think it was Elektra, they just completely stopped everything and said, no, this has got to be on the album, got all this momentum behind it, and sort of like as a joke, it was sort of art imitating life, so to speak. Very interesting.
And what a perfectly poetic way to do it too. But I will say this, Super Drag is so much more than Sucked Out. Please go dive into the rest of that album and some of the follow-ups, because they are just a fantastically wonderful band that is, again, pigeonholed in that one-hit wonder basket, but I feel there's so much more than that.
Well said. Well, okay, what I'm going to do then is let's keep a little of the irony going on this. And I will also say this is another one where please buy more than just this single. And that is going to be Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitta.
Nice.
Also from 1997. And this is one, Brian, where you're probably going to have to tell me to stop talking, because I think of all my songs on the list, Harvey Danger is it's one of my favorite bands as a whole, and I just absolutely love this song. I think anytime you've got a band that does meet that criteria with this one hit, but you love the rest of their music, I think the common phrase that people throw out is like, that's not even close to their best song. I will still say I still absolutely love this song. Is it my favorite of their songs? Probably not, but that's not to downgrade this one by any means. I think Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger, it was so hilarious because, back to the irony, I mean, they're sort of making fun of the very people that are listening to and grabbing this music. Pierce my tongue, it doesn't hurt, it feels fine. I just loved the wit, the sardonic sense of humor that he had, both in this song and his music as a whole. Harvey Danger, over the course of several years and lots of breakups and coming back together, put out 3 incredible albums. Absolutely encourage anybody to dive into this one and their other 2. But Flagpole Sitta had to make my list.
That was actually on the first ever, at least in the US, Now That's What I Call Music compilation. So there's a little fun fact for that one. When I worked in a music store again during that same time, that song, I vividly remember people coming in saying, okay, I'm looking for a song, but hear me out. It's not Rage Against the Machine. However, it's a happier, upbeat song that talks about Rage Against the Machine. I said, well, it's actually saying Rage Against the Machines, but I know exactly what song you're talking about. Handed them a copy of Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone, and it left the store shortly thereafter. It peaked at number 38 on the US Billboard Hot 100 Airplay chart. And unfortunately, that was it on the charts for this band and probably shouldn't have been. Again, this song was so big. I go to see cover bands to this day, and this song is still played, and everybody in the room lights up. This song has a timeless nature to it. It's very endearing. It's very fun. It's pop. It's angsty. It's got a little bit of the punk vibe. I've heard people put this on pop punk playlists, and it unironically works there. And I feel like this is a band that, like you said, people need to know more about. So I'm glad that that made the list because, I mean, hell, going all the way back, New Radical, Space Hog, Super Drag, Harvey Danger, all underrated. No offense to Baz, but he had Moulin Rouge. I think he's well established as a rated, quote unquote, entity.
Yeah, Baz is doing all right.
Yeah.
Baz is doing all right. Yeah, and if you do want to know more about Harvey Danger, I have to at least admit my favorite album of theirs is their early 2000s one's called Little by Little. And we were fortunate enough to have Sean Nelson. No, his name is not Harvey Danger, lead singer. Sean Nelson on Album Divers to break down every single track of Little by Little. So if you'd like to check that out, that's available too.
Fantastic. And now we talked earlier about art imitating life. Well, before I get into that, I love the fact that you brought up the fact that his name's not Harvey Danger, because I sometimes have to explain to people that Leonard Skinner is not the name, nor is Marshall Tucker, nor is Jethro Tull. And that is definitely a band name that you could throw into the mix. So that might be a future episode there. Band names that aren't actually people. So,
that's a good point. I think the thick glasses on Sean made him kind of look like his name could be Harvey, but yes, Sean Nelson.
So now we're going to go into art imitating life, imitating art. And I mentioned this band earlier when I talked about Stacy's mom, and that is Fountains of Wayne. But Fountains of Wayne did have more than Stacy's mom. Radiation Vibe was a hit in the 90s. They have a ton of stuff. However, Adam Schlesinger, who we sadly lost at the beginning of COVID, wrote a song in the 90s that was not performed by him, but was a close to top 40 hit. It reached number 41 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart. Number 22 on the adult contemporary chart, number 18 on the adult top 40 chart, and number 24 on the top 40 mainstream chart. As well, in 1996, several oldie stations added this song to their rotation alongside of the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Del Vikings. That song being the fictitious band, the Wonders, not the Oneaters, That Thing You Do, from the movie of the same name, probably my favorite movie of all time. The song was nominated for a 1996 Golden Globe Award, as well as Academy Award for Best Original Song. On the soundtrack, it's repeated twice. Again, one of my favorite movies. Of course, I own the soundtrack. Track 15 is the live at the Hollywood Television Showcase version that you see in the movie. And as far as cover versions go, this song has made waves. The Knack recorded a version for their 1998 hits collection. Newfound Glory covered it on their 2000 EP From the Screen to Your Stereo. And Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day covered this on his 2020 album, No Fun Mondays. The album was released on Playtone Records, the quote-unquote label from the movie, which is actually a real record label. Playtone Records has distributed soundtracks over the years, including The Sopranos, both of the soundtracks from that, Bring It On, Josie and the Pussycats, Band of Brothers, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and a couple of others as well. So Playtone Records is a legit label. And this song, to me, coming out of the energy of Flagpole Sitta, just keeps that kind of boppy energy going.
Awesome pick. I love that this is it's a fictitious band supposedly in the 60s with a 90s one hit written by a guy who had a one hit in the 2000s. This is nicely done, bringing all that together. This is great. And what an awesome song. This is one I would not have even thought of to put on this list, but I think it works so well. But yeah, you just don't even think about this as being I think of it as the movie. I think about it as a song for the movie, but it fits the criteria, and I'm so glad it's on here. What an awesome movie, too. I didn't realize that was your favorite, but one of my favorite movies for sure from that era as well.
It's tough, man. The 90s and 2000s were so great. Like 3 of my favorite movies ever were That Thing You Do, Empire Records, and High Fidelity. And wouldn't you know it, they're all centered around music. Almost Famous could be thrown into that discussion. So yeah, I like movies based about music. You'd be shocked to find out.
Yes.
All right. What are you going to follow up That Thing You Do with?
All right. Well, definitely we're going to keep sort of this dancey vibe going because you can definitely move to that song. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. This is a song from 1997. The album was called When I Was Born for the Seventh Time. And the name of the band is Corner Shop. This song is called Brimful of Asha. Don't ask me what that means. As I mentioned, I'm cheating a little bit on this track. This did not make the top 100 at all. It did make number 16 on the modern rock charts, number 35 on the US dance singles. And I think the reason I had to put this on, in addition to just the fact that I love this song, is technically speaking, this is the first concert I ever went to. And it was in 1997. I was going to see Oasis. And this is the band that opened.
I was literally this song is on my list. And in 1997, I saw Oasis with Corner Shop opening. And again, this was one of those songs that at the music store I worked at, they had a booth where you could spin new albums, and everybody kept going to the booth with Corner Shop on it. This was a weird 90s single. I say weird in a good way because it was dancey, but it was rock, but it almost had this atmospheric element to it on top of it all. It's very hard to kind of define what Brimful of Asha is as a song, and it charted at 16 on the modern rock charts and number 35 on the dance singles charts. So it had this weird crossover appeal. And I'm so glad you mentioned the Oasis connection there too, because I saw that show when it ran through New Jersey.
Totally. I mean, talk about pinpointing my coming of age years. I think I said it was sometime in 96, but it wasn't that long after here in 97 that I'm riding from Yakima, Washington, where I grew up, in my friend's dad's car, because of course we can't drive yet, wearing clothes that they really didn't want us to be wearing. I paid probably way too much for an Oasis t-shirt at the merch table. So I just have so many memories of being at this concert and thinking of this time where music is starting to seep into who I am. And Corner Shop, of course, just sort of battery rammed its way into that, being the opening track. And yes, my buddy and I were kind of looking at each other throughout the opening going, what the hell is this? And both of us have, of course, since have bought the album and listened to it. And yes, weird is a good description. Though I will say they are a band that has continued to put out music. And one of the things that we do on Album Divers is the very last episode, we pick our 5 favorite albums of the year. And in 2020, which is the first year we started our podcast, Corner Shop's England is a Garden album in 2020 was one of my favorite albums of that year and made my top 5. So they're still doing a lot of good things here.
Well, I'm going to tap into that weirdness, I think, for my next pick. And go with a song that does have a little bit of a weird feeling to it. Definitely an indie vibe, a little bit of punk. It's a song that's hard to nail down, just like Corner Shop. And it came out in 1995 on their album, I Am an Elastic Firecracker. And I'm going to go with a song by Tripping Daisy and I Got a Girl. Reached number 6 on the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart, did not make the Hot 100. But this band to me was pretty iconic because every time I turned on an alternative radio station, and I went to college in North Carolina in 1995, but I also graduated high school a few months earlier in New Jersey. Everywhere I went, from state to state, when I was driving from New Jersey to North Carolina, and you would be switching radio stations trying to find something on your car trips, I Got a Girl was on the radio, always on the radio. And there was just something so endearing about this song. Sadly, after their lead guitarist Wes Berggren passed away in 1999, the band did break up with a bunch of the members going on to form the Polyphonic Spree, which are still out making music. Tripping Daisy did reunite in 2017 for a few live shows, but that was sadly it. Hopefully, maybe there's more on the table. Again, underrated. Definitely comes to mind here. Little weird, little fun. I got a girl, but she's got a guy.
Nice to keep the weird going on that one. Yeah, so back to the difference between a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I did not know about this song in 1995 either. So this is one that I had discovered later. Didn't know about the connections until just now, you talking about that and Polyphonic Spree and everything else. So yeah, this is a good one. I think this is one where if in 1995 I walked by the album cover in a record store, being an 11-year-old, I think I probably would have freaked out and just kept walking. So I'm not surprised that this is one that didn't jump into my radar until later. But I'm glad to hear that it's worth getting back into the album as a whole, because I know the song and I don't know the rest of their history or anything else they've put out, so I'll have to do that.
Could be a future Album Divers episode for you, because the album is fantastic. But what are you going to follow up I Got a Girl with?
Good question. Let me think of what I have left here. So we'll go a little bit forward here. 1 year later, this is 1996, and I think we're just going to throw a little bit of distortion, a little bit of energy back into this one. A little more straight up rock song, although I'll harken back to my first list here with a little bit of, in this case, tongue-in-cheek advice for you in the 90s. This is the band Not a Surf and their song, their most popular song, Popular, coming out in 1996. I cheated again on this one. This one reached 51 on the U.S. radio songs, 11 on U.S. alternative airplay. But for me, in 96, again, I think this is probably the month that I decided I was starting to get into music. This was all over the place. Radio, friends' playlists, all these different things. I just have a lot of memories with this one. Riding around in high school, in the car with friends. This is definitely one that I had to put on the list. I think it follows Trippin' Daisy pretty good.
Oh, it certainly does. 1996's High and Low was produced by Rick Ocasek of the Cars. And there was something about his production in the 90s that I just went head over heels for. Obviously, he produced Weezer's Blue album. He produced Bad Religion's The Gray Race, and he produced Not a Surf's Popular. And all it took was for me to hear that he produced this album for me to go out and buy it. Because no matter what the sound was, I knew he was going to bring something to it that resonated with me. I've mentioned many a times that The Cars Self-Titled is my favorite album of all time. There's something about what Rick brought to these albums in the 90s. He was forward thinking, but also did enough elements from the past to make it relevant, but also engage a wider audience. And that was what I loved about The Cars Self-Titled album, was because he was pushing grounds forward while also looking back simultaneously. And that's how he helped usher in with the rest of the Cars, breaking the new wave into the mainstream. I really wish Not a Surf had more quote unquote popularity after this song, because I think they're so much more than popular. They've put out a ton of amazing albums throughout the 90s and the 2000s, and they're still out there doing it. And this is a band that I think people should really dive deep and go through their catalog and do a dive, because they're in for a treat.
No question. Yeah, we'll put that underrated label on this as well.
So to close out side A, I'm going to choose a song that we talked about all the way back on episode 3, The Ultimate Songs of 1993 with Ed Kennard. And this, to me, I talked about the bass line earlier that you chose with Space Hogs in the Meantime. I'm going to go with another bass line that immediately grabbed my attention. And that is The Breeders' Cannonball from 1993's Last Splash.
Choice.
When that bass line comes in, like, that's all it takes. If I was on Name That Tune, all I would need is and it's like, okay, boom, I'm chiming in. I know the song. It's that much of an earworm. And the song is amazing. And I would say, capping off a side that has a ton of underrated artists, The Breeders has to be included in that conversation. Not a top 40 hit number 44. But I think its impact on music is bigger than its chart history. I think bands like Veruca Salt, bands like Garbage, hell, even songs that are outside of the Breeders' indie rock sound, no doubt. Female rock was alive and well in the 90s, but you had that side that was more of the Lilith Fair, which was the Jewel, the Indigo Girls. The Breeders helped usher in the fact that, no, women are here to rock too. And they did it with authority. And I love the fact that they're still out there playing songs now, because they were out touring with, I want to say it's Olivia Rodrigo, which how amazing is that for a modern pop artist to bring out somebody like the Breeders and give their music an introduction to this generation, and hopefully what we're doing here as well tonight. So closing out side A, Cannonball by the Breeders.
What a great choice. Yeah, this is one where I feel like you cheated on many levels putting this one on, and I'm totally fine with it. I'm so glad you did that. Like you said, it was 44. It's not quite on the 40. Fair enough, close enough. And then, the Breeders, like we're talking about the extensions into the Pixies. And so there was a part of me that's going, wow, that's definitely taken some liberty. But I'm so glad you did. I almost put Hunger Strike on here by Temple of the Dog, but then I was like, but that's Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. I can't really mix that. So now I'm thinking I probably could have, because this fits into that criteria as well. Such a great song. I'll sound like a broken record here, but because 93, it's another one that I didn't discover until later and understand the connections to the Pixies and all those different things as well. You said it well with that bass line that starts it off. This is just one that if you heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times, and I'm glad a lot of people have heard it 1,000 times. So it definitely deserves to be on this top hits from the 90s like we're doing here.
Well, there you have it, folks. Side A of our ultimate one-hit wonders of the 90s playlist, which kicked off with Baz Luhrmann's Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen, New Radicals, You Get What You Give, Space Hogs, In the Meantime, Super Drags, Sucked Out, Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitta, The Wonders, That Thing You Do, Corner Shops, Brimful of Asha, Trippin' Daisies, I Got a Girl, Not a Surf's Popular, and The Breeders' Cannonball. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs we've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. Now, Trevor, before we flip our proverbial mixtape over to side B, why don't you tell people a little bit about Album Divers and what you guys have going on over there?
Sure. So instead of baking sourdough bread when the pandemic hit, I started thinking what I could spend some of my time doing, and we decided, Buddy and I decided to start this podcast called Album Divers. Really, we just decided it would be kind of a time capsule for our friendship and a way to revisit old albums. Our only rule on that podcast is we have to alternate between a new album and an older. So a new meaning it has to come out in the year that we're doing that particular podcast. Of course, we're in 2024 now, so we're doing new albums from 2024, and then every other episode goes back into something from the past. And that's been kind of fun because we're both guys getting into our late 30s, early 40s, and I think the tendency to want to get pigeonholed into a particular type of music from your past, nostalgia, as we're doing here. I'm glad we're doing that. Breaks me out of that. So that's what it's all about. Sometimes we get some artists on there. We break down every single track from the album because we believe that the album format is a holy thing, and then we just have fun talking about it. So we release episodes whenever we feel like it, so I cannot believe my weekly mixtape. I'm very impressed every single time you get an episode out every week. If you tune in, you'll get episodes here and there, so that's what we do.
Yeah, I didn't think about that when I named it, that I was basically setting myself up for an expectation.
Hey, it's a good little bit of structure that forces you to do it.
There you go. Well, moving over to side B, I'm going to keep the female vibe that we ended side A with, which was the Breeders' Cannonball. And I'm going to go with a song that, when I say the band name, yes, it is a one-hit wonder, but the lead person in that band has written so many songs that are hits. It's almost hard for me to quantify including this one. However, for the band Four Non Blondes, What's Up was their biggest hit song. Reached number 14 on the Billboard US Hot 100. I think as of right now, that's the highest chart topping song we've talked about tonight. However, when you look at her songs outside of Four Non Blondes, she's written Can't Let Go by Adele, Candyman and Beautiful by Christina Aguilera, Danger Zone by Gwen Stefani, Pink's Get the Party Started, My Love by Celine Dion, Superwoman by Alicia Keys. Like, Linda Perry's a massive songwriter. I'm shocked that that didn't hit more with Four Non Blondes. They're a great band. If you listen to the Led Zeppelin tribute album that came out in the 90s, they do an insane version of Misty Mountain Hop. Her voice is incredible. The song is fantastic. I know this one could be a little divisive for some people, but Lainey Wilson put out a cover on her most recent album, and that kind of brought it into modern country flavor now. And I also want to give a shout out to Patreon mixtaper Sean Goff, who had chimed in with this one. But yeah, let's kick off side two with one that everybody's familiar with. Four Non Blondes, What's Up?
This is one you could not escape on the radio. You mentioned this one being somewhat divisive. I'll admit that I'll probably fall on the I've heard it enough times side of this one. Mm-hmm. But I think Linda Perry deserves to be on this list for sure. And if I just think about it in terms of true, complete nostalgia, this being on the radio when I was a kid, I remember this one as well. I'm surprised to see it was 1993. I don't know how many weeks it spent on that Hot 100, but I feel like, again, my coming of age years being a little later than that, I feel like it was still on the radio all the time when I was listening to music, mostly in the later 90s.
All right, so following that up, what do you have for track two?
All right, well, let's see. What's Up was one of the picks by one of your listeners, your Patreon listeners. I believe I heard you say this one was as well. And we're going to go forward a couple years here. This is March of 96, and that's Primitive Radio Gods. It's Standing Outside of a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hands. I can't even tell you what I love about this song. I mean, I can tell you, I can break down all these different elements of it, but it's definitely one of those greater than the sum of its parts musical experiences is what I want to call this, even more so than a song. I mean, you've got the B.B. King sample, you got the church bells, the piano I appreciated so much more, even just re-listening to this as I compiled these lists of songs. And then I just even think him coming back in and singing the same B.B. King sample with his own voice just adds a really cool element to it. This is almost like just a meditation from the 90s or something like that. So I had to have this one on there. In terms of memories, this is one that I believe was playing from one of my friend's older brother's stereo when I was coming over. So I just have memories of like playing with Legos, but having this going in the background. Just a great song. I had to have it on the list.
I first discovered this song on the soundtrack to 1996's The Cable Guy.
That's
movie
right.
That was at least advertised as a slapstick comedy, but was actually a very dark comedy from Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick. And I remember hearing it in the movie and getting the soundtrack. And I was so stoked when Rocket finally came out because I got to kind of dig more into this group. Reached number 1 on the Billboard US Modern Rock Track charts and number 10 on the US Hot 100 airplay charts. Love the B.B. King sample. Like, that was something about the 90s. They really dove into sampling great music. You think about what A Tribe Called Quest did, sampling like these iconic jazz bass lines and jazz movements in their music. And it moved its way into the rock side of things with groups like Primitive Radio Gods. And yes, shout out to Patreon mixtaper Seeker, who chimed in with this one as well. I didn't have this on my list because I felt like I hit the weird part of my spectrum with the Trippin' Daisy kind of stuff, but I'm so glad that it's being included here because there is that element of the 90s that's just inescapable.
No question about it. Yeah, I even think of like DJ Shadow introducing all of that. You're right, the sampling, I didn't think about it until you brought that together, but there was a ton of that going on. And this song brought that to the mainstream. I mean, this was on everybody's radio for sure.
And I think I'm going to do a song to follow it up that is a little bit of a pivot. However, this song was produced by Brian Eno. And the band originally thought that this song should have been a B-side. And it was Eno's pushing that led them to release it on the album, which was a smart move. It reached number 61 on the Billboard US Hot 100, which again, not a top 40 hit, but I have never seen a cover band, at least in New Jersey, and I am one of them because I love performing the song, get through a 3-set night without strumming the opening to James Laid from 1993. For people that are a little older, it was the theme to the American Pie franchise. And if you saw the movie American Wedding, the version you hear at the opening is not James' version. That is actually Matt Nathanson covering it. However, if you know the American Pie movie franchise, you're familiar with this song. The riff is simplistically perfect. There's something that it's a real simple riff to play, but as soon as you hear it, people's faces light up. They love singing along with it. The falsetto notes, most people can't hit it, but they try anyway, and it becomes a lot of fun. And the song, again, underrated band. James has a greatest hits album. There is more to James than just Laid. However, this was their one flirtation with the Billboard charts, at least in the Hot 100, and I feel like it deserves a mention here.
Good choice. Yeah. Being a little bit younger, for me, it was the American Pie movies that brought this into my awareness for sure. Yeah, this is like, it's got that kind of like sleazy lounge sound. It's not just the lyrics, it's just the way that he sings it, the kind of pizzazz that he puts on it, the energy that he does. I was discussing this. My other job is I'm a physical therapist. I have this patient that loves music, and so I was saying, all right, while I work on your foot here, what are your favorite songs from the 90s or your one hits from the 90s? And I mentioned this song as an idea, and he, being a little older than me, he said, oh yeah, he said, I've seen them live, and he's like, that's what did it for me. I didn't think much of James until I saw them that way, and just I love that song ever since. So if I get a chance to do that, that would be pretty awesome.
All right, what are you going to follow up Laid with?
All right, I deliberated on some of the other ones here, but this you've set me up here. If we're into the sexy part of our mix here, we'll keep that part going. We'll jump forward a few years here, and we're in 1997, and that is going to be Marcy Playground off their self-titled, and this song is Sex and Candy.
Nice.
We're in that time period here as the 90s start to close off where it's that purgatory between that post-grunge. People aren't really sure what to do after Nirvana, and some of these bands are no longer going here, but not quite into where we're at, wherever we get into those early 2000s. But I think some songs did that a little bit better than others, and Marcy Playground does an awesome job of borrowing what really worked from those earlier years and being creative enough to kind of point us in the direction where we're going. Sex and Candy is one of those songs that anybody from the late 90s is going to know. I think it follows James Laid very well, so I'm happy to lay this down next.
Couldn't agree more. Reached number 8 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. So as of right now, our highest charting song of our discussion this evening. And this song was featured in 1999's Polka Power from Weird Al's Running with Scissors. So if you're featured in a Weird Al polka, it was a hit song. And this is the first Weird Al polka featured song this evening. So I feel like that definitely deserves its own spotlight in and of itself. And to give this song a little bit more of a modern spin, Maroon 5 actually covered the song as a bonus track on their 2014 album 5. So if you want to look up an interesting version, they do a pretty cool job of it. I'm not the biggest Maroon 5 fan on the planet, but they definitely have moments where they write extremely catchy tunes, and they did a great cover of it. So definitely worth looking up. I saw Marcy Playground on one of the 90s package tours, I want to say about a decade ago. It was Marcy Playground, Gin Blossoms, Lit, Sugar Ray, and Everclear. It was a really fun 90s afternoon of music. But wow, coming out of Sex and Candy, I'm going to pull away from the sexy time that we had going on with the last two songs. But I'm going to stay in 1997. And I'm kind of shocked we haven't had a number one hit yet, and we're still not. This song reached number 2, but it's one of those songs that when I say it, you almost question how wasn't it a number one hit because of its endless airplay on top 40 stations, on rock stations, on AOR stations. This just crossed all sorts of genres. And I'm going to go with Meredith Brooks's Bitch from 1997's Blurring the Edges. Talk about a song that was completely inescapable no matter what station you went to. And it was catchy and it was infectious, and I never got sick of it. The song just, as soon as it started, it had almost that guitar riff that was reminiscent of The Who's Baba O'Reilly, but it's done in a poppy way, and the song just always lured me in. It never got old. Here we are decades later, and anytime it comes on, I still dig the song as much as I did in 97. So shout out to Meredith Brooks. Again, dive into the album. There's more on that album than Bitch, but this was the one song that truly catapulted for her.
Nice pick. This is genius, I think, because, you got the FCC that's like, all right, you can't say any bad words at all, but you can say bitch. Why? I don't know. You can't say a-hole. You can't say the D word. All of these things, there might be typical insults for a man, but feel free to throw bitch out as much as you want. And I think Meredith Brooks, as a woman in the late 90s, was like, okay, you're allowed to say that word. I'm just going to own that. I'm going to write a song about it. I'm going to say it over and over and over again, and you're going to play it constantly. I thought that was just genius.
The word too.
Exactly. She took charge of it. Perfect pick for this, and very reminiscent of, I think, a woman of the 90s just grabbing onto something like that and making it her own. I think that's great. All
right. So what are you going to follow that up with?
All right. How do I feel like there's some sort of transition here from bitch to this one. So we've got a woman claiming the word bitch, putting out a hit that way. And then we're going to go to a man, and we're going same year here. This is 1997, putting out a song called Your Woman. And that is an artist called White Town. And I suppose this could have fallen into the weird part of our mix. Didn't know we were going to have a weird and a sexy part and this women empowerment, gender bending part. But here we are in the 90s with all these different subparts of our mix. And I think, I think White Town, Your Woman, this is one, 97. Again, I'm 13, so I'm not quite super accepting of all the, there's just a lot of things that I'm trying to wrap my mind around still as a 13-year-old. So this one, I think, stood out not only for the sound, but also just because, again, I thought it was strange. And you can't help thinking about and dissecting these lyrics of this man singing, I could never be your woman. And it had this kind of hypnotic, kind of cult-like sound to it that I just couldn't help playing over and over again and listening to. And I think, again, it's one that I remember from my coming-of-age years because of that, but probably one that I've revisited as I've gotten older and appreciated more and more. I haven't kept up with what White Town did after this hit, but I just felt like I wanted to cement this one on our mix from the 90s here.
I'm so glad you did. This was one that fell off my radar for such a long time. And I want to say, God, in the last decade, we were in Kohl's or something like that, Target, one of these stores. And the song was playing over the music, but we had walked in just at the end. So all I was hearing was da, 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 almost like the Imperial March from Star Wars, but it's done differently. And all that took was that little 10 seconds of earworm. And for the rest of the day, I was walking around going, like tapping my head. And it started driving me nuts because I didn't have enough time to Shazam it. And I called up a couple of friends just humming that part. I'm like, we're going back to the 90s for this. Any idea? And finally someone said, oh, dude, White Town, Your Woman. And I went and looked up the album and realized that this song was everywhere. But just as fast as it exploded, I feel like it sadly disappeared. And musically, we're bringing back some of that sampling like we talked about.
Right.
From older songs like we did on Primitive Radio Gods, as well as some stuff on Side A. and done in such a way that just made it feel so modern and fresh. And it reached number 23 on the Billboard US Hot 100. And then sadly, that was, unfortunately, at least in the mainstream realm, it for Whitetown, but such a big statement. And while I don't have anything weird in my list, I can tap into that horn section loop that's going on in Whitetown and pivot into another one-hit wonder that is definitely going to genre bend us a little bit here, but damn it, I think musically these two are going to work really cool back and forth. And I'm going to go off of 1993's Hand on the Torch, and we're going to get some jazz sampling from an album that was released on Blue Note Records, and we're going to go Us Three, Cantaloupe, Flip Fantasia, reach number 9 on the US Billboard Hot 100. And I want to say our first song that's incorporating hip hop into the mix tonight, which is awesome. And this song, again, genre bending. Yes, it was a hip hop song, but a lot of top 40 stations and even some rock stations played it because of the vibe that the song brought, the energy that the song brought, crossed it over, at least in the New York market. And I think that is what speaks to the endurance of a track. The fact that it could speak equally on different radio stations across different airwaves to different audience demographics. And this one did it effortlessly. So coming out of Your Woman, let's get a little Flip Fantasia in the mix here.
Nice little head jerk on this one. Yeah, okay. I didn't see this one coming. 92, right?
This was 93. Hand on the
93.
Torch.
Okay. So I was 9 years old at the point where this came out. And yeah, I remember this one not only being on the radio as a kid there, but I used to go watch this CBA basketball team in Yakima, Washington, the Yakima Sun Kings. And this was like warm-up song amongst many others that was just playing constantly. So this takes me back to those memories, riding in the car with my dad, going to these basketball games and hearing this song. And yeah, what a great way to follow up the horn section loop that we've got in Whitetown. I'm excited to listen to our mix when it's all done because I think that's just going to feed in perfectly. Nice pick. I like it.
All right, we're coming up to the home stretch here. You got 2 picks. I've got 1. What do you got left?
All right. Yeah, I've only got 2 left. I know what I think I have to end with, so that means I'm slotting this one in after Cantaloupe here. I don't know how the transition's going to sound, but I feel like that's the 90s. Every year was a little bit different, so if you don't have one that sticks out, then it really doesn't encapsulate the decade. And that's where 1994 Possum Kingdom by the Toadies is going to slot in here. So this is one, I mentioned the 96, 97-ish years being my coming of age. So I would have thought in self-reflection on this one that I wouldn't have remembered it as a child. I didn't remember it listening to it in 94. I think I was a little too young for that. But I was young enough. It probably did pop in for me around 96, 97. And sometimes one of those songs that, though was big just a few years ago, just especially as a one-hit wonder, passes through. But this one had a resurgence, at least among my friend group. Even though if we were listening to stuff that was coming out in 96, 97, 98, a lot of my friends still went back to 94 to put this song on mixtapes for me in the 90s. And I don't know, man, this is just one that you talked about the bass line for Breeders' Cannonball. That guitar part to start this, the dana, 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 dana. I mean, that just grabbed me immediately. And then once I got into what the lyrics were about as a angsty teenager with this weird story about these vampires, pre-Twilight era, by the way, if anybody's listening. This is not your PG version of the vampire story. I just loved it. So Possum Kingdom Toadies had to make my list. I believe this one does meet the criteria. If not, it was close, but I had to put it on anyways.
As far as I'm concerned, it meets the criteria. It reached number 9 on the Billboard US mainstream rock charts, and they did have a follow-up single, Away, which only reached 23 on the mainstream rock track charts. So in terms of Hot 100, Toadies are actually a no-hit wonder band.
Okay, all right.
But that said, charts be damned, because, again, cover bands, I see Possum Kingdom to this day played a lot in bar rooms still. That riff is iconic. It's an iconic 90s opening riff. So sometimes a hit song is not defined by the level it charted. It's endurance, its legacy, and Possum Kingdom has that.
No doubt about it.
So coming out of that, I have one song left, and I'm going to go right on the nose with this one, with a band that I feel like, because a lot of the bands I picked was underrated, and this is one that I think, I don't want to say tops that chart, but is up there with some of the most underrated. I first saw these guys live in 1998, opening for Soul Asylum and Matchbox 20. They were the opening band. And the one thing I will never forget is the opening piano part and drums were played by the drummer at the same time. I had never seen anything like this in my life, and it absolutely blew my mind. From 1998's Feeling Strangely Fine, I'm going to go with Semisonic's Closing Time, number 1 on the US Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart, but shockingly, not on the Hot 100. They had other songs, Singing in My Sleep, Chemistry, that are all amazing tunes, didn't chart. Semisonic is a fantastic power pop rock group. Please dive into their catalog. They are still putting out music. It's still amazing. Unfortunately, when people hear the name Semisonic, though, the first thing they think about is Closing Time. Written about a bar room? Maybe. There's been a lot of talk that the song is written about the birth of a child, which when you listen to the lyrics through that light, it makes it a much more powerful song. And I've seen countless cover bands and shows with this song. Not once have I seen a band open up set one with it. So I now put this out as a challenge to all the cover bands out there listening. Some food for thought. Open the show with Closing Time and see how it goes over, and then let me know, because I want to see the look on people's faces when the first song of the night is Semisonic's Closing Time.
That would be a good one. Well, I think you didn't quite have the nerve to do it higher up in our list there, but I'm glad you kept it where it would be here.
I couldn't see it coming out of Baz Luhrmann's "Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen" quite as strong as New Radicals did at that part of the mixtape.
You did a good job, yeah, and rightfully so. It ends up here close to the end here. Yeah, man, lots of memories of this one as well. Again, 98, I was into the throes of listening to music, so I bought this album immediately. I could probably tell you the track list order if I had to right now off the top of my head. And but back to being underrated. We have a lot on the list. I think Semisonic, and then I'll just even say Dan Wilson as a artist. He's released some solo stuff. He's a great writer. He's got a lot going on up there in terms of his writing skills. So I think the one about Birth of a Child, probably I'm lean towards being the meaning of this one, just in the context of how well he writes everything else. But yeah, what a great band, what a great album, and a great song to end your part. So can I cap us off here at the end? Yeah, you get to put the cherry on top of our 90s one-hit wonders mixtape. What are we closing out the night with? I feel honored. All right, so if we start off, building the energy from the beginning, you got something pulling you in a little bit with Baz Luhrmann and the advice to the 90s. We're going to fade out here at the end, and that is Fade Into You by Mazzy Star. Ooh, okay. This one came out in 93, so true to form. This is one I discovered later. In fact, I'm embarrassed to say, much, much later. It's probably a few years ago that I really understood. I think I knew this song. I mean, if it came on, I would hear it. In fact, I was calling this to my podcast co-host sort of this Moby Dick song for me, because I would hear it. It would be on in the background at work or something. It seemed like any playlist of any artist that I like, somehow this also seeped in. And because I feel like it has a timeless quality, I just assumed it was a more recent artist. In fact, I think it was popping up when I was putting in Angel Olsen or somebody like that, and I could hear her doing this song. I assumed it was a recent track, and it wasn't till doing a lot of digging and asking around that I figured out this is 1993. So one of the fun things about listening to music today, when you can have some of these algorithms throwing music at you, is I don't know that this one would have creep back into my consciousness had I not done it that way. And I'm glad that I finally caught my Moby Dick, and I'm glad that it's ending this album, because Fade Into You, Mazzy Star in general, is an artist that everybody should know. And you can add me to the list now.
Love the song. Absolutely. I'm going to just say it. It's a beautiful song.
Mm-hmm.
Reached number 44 on the US Billboard Hot 100 from the album So Tonight, That I Might See. And I also want to throw out there, because we talked about it earlier in the night, just like Harvey Danger, Mazzy Star, band name, not an artist name. So just put that out there when we do that Jethro Tull, Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker episode. Harvey Danger and Mazzy Star will probably make that discussion as well. But what a perfect way to close out Side B. There you have it, folks. Side B of our ultimate 90s one-hit wonders mixtape, which kicked off with 4 Non-Blondes, What's Up, Primitive Radio Gods, Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand, James Lade, Marcy Playgrounds, Sex and Candy, Meredith Brooks, Bitch, White Town's Your Woman, Us Three's Cantaloupe, Flip Fantasia, Toadie's Possum Kingdom, Semisonic's Closing Time, and Mazzy Star's Fade Into You. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs we've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. Well, Trevor, why don't you let people know where they can learn more about Album Divers and connect with you on social media?
Sounds good. We're on all the social platforms just at Album Divers. And if somebody out there listening has an album that you'd like us to dive into and break down, feel free to write us at albumdiverspodcast.com or just DM us anywhere, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere like that. And you can stream us on all of the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all of those places.
Well, Trevor, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for joining me on My Weekly Mixtape, and looking forward to having you back again soon, man.
Sounds good. Been an honor to be on here, Brian. Thank you so much for letting me come.
Well, remember, you can find My Weekly Mixtape on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. There you can enjoy ad-free episodes of the show, chime in on future episode topics, become a future guest, and so much more. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.
The Arwen Lewis Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment, featured on Pantheon Podcasts. And I'm Arwen. I inhabit our blue planet, but my beliefs belong in the celestial realm. I'm the daughter of Peter Lewis, founding member of rock and roll cult icons Moby Grape, and the granddaughter of Oscar-winning actress Loretta Young, and I've been part of the creative cosmos all my life. I'm a recording artist, musician, songwriter, and producer, and I am your host for The Arwen Lewis Show. The Arwen Lewis Show features in-depth interviews with the hottest indie music artists and music royalty. Listen to me on any of your favorite digital listening platforms, particularly from my channel on Pantheon Podcasts and thearwenlewisshow.com.
Hi, this is Peter Lewis and Moby Grape. You're listening to The Arwen Lewis Show.